Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy daily newspaper analysis. Today is 3rd January 2025, and first of all, a very happy new year for everybody. And today we have some very important topics from different newspapers. So one by one we'll be discussing all these topics in detailed way. So the first topic is about the Aravalli mountain ranges and the mining, and questions about the sustainability. And then we'll also understand the need for climate resilient agriculture in India. And the third most important topic is recent water contamination in Indore and deaths associated with it. And then we'll also understand center's tobacco tax, and this tobacco tax is going to take effect from February 1st this year. And we'll also understand very briefly about Lokpal and Lokayukta. So these are the list of topics for today's discussion, and let's understand the Aravalli question and strategic assumptions. And we have been discussing about this Aravalli mountain ranges and the threat posed to these mountains by mining, particularly the illegal mining. But the key concern here is that recently Supreme Court has also allowed a certain extent mining in this Aravalli ranges that may threaten the overall sustainability of the Aravalli ranges. Now let's first understand the important significance of the Aravalli ranges before going into the details, and then we'll understand how to protect Aravalli ranges. What are the threats that these Aravalli ranges have been facing? Now, if we talk about the significance of the Aravalli ranges, so Aravalli is considered as one of the oldest mountain systems in the world. So why it is considered as oldest mountain system? Because Aravalli is around 1.5 billion years old mountain system, right? So it is around 1.5 billion year old mountain system. And in fact, the Aravalli mountain system, it stretches across few states, right, from Gujarat, Rajasthan, Haryana and Delhi. So therefore around 4 states it stretches from, and apart from that, it is one of the oldest mountain system in the world. However, we have to understand few important and significant aspects with respect to the Aravalli mountains. Now, what are those aspects? For example, Aravalli mountains are very important for water security, because Aravalli mountains help recharge the groundwater tables in these areas. And Aravalli mountains also control desertification in the area, because if you see on the west of Aravalli mountains, there is a Thar desert, right? So in fact, Aravalli mountains actually block the Thar desert and the expansion of this Thar desert into the Indo-Gangetic plains. So therefore, it actually prevents desertification into the Indo-Gangetic plains. And another significant aspect about the Aravalli mountain ranges is that it also plays a very important role as a moderator of climate or climate moderation, and even it also helps in biodiversity conservation in the Aravalli mountain ranges, because Aravalli mountain ranges are known for rich flora and fauna. So because of this reason, so Aravalli mountains are very, very important, right? So they play a very important role in biodiversity conservation, and they play a very important role in moderation of climate, water security, and even they prevent expansion of deserts into the Indo-Gangetic plains. However, what threats Aravalli mountains have been facing? So that we have to understand, and why these Aravalli mountain ranges are in news in recent times. So they are in news in recent times because of conflict between environmental protection. Now, environmental protection in the sense that we have understood the importance and significance of the Aravalli mountains. However, because of the economic needs, we need to extract the mineral resources as well. So however, Aravalli mountains are known for the mineral resources. Aravalli mountains are known for mineral resources. So we need to extract the mineral resources for economic growth, or to fulfill our economic needs, to reduce our dependence on other countries. So here the key conflict is environmental conservation versus the resource extraction or mineral resources extraction, and that is the key question with respect to the Aravalli mountain ranges. Because in recent times, Supreme Court has also come up with the interventions. Earlier, the Supreme Court has said that a certain portion of Aravalli mountains can be opened for the mining as well, so that we could fulfill our economic needs. We could extract the strategic mineral resources. We could also reduce our dependence on other countries for these minerals. right? So because of all these reasons, the primary issue is the conflict between environmental conservation and resource extraction from the Aravalli mountain ranges, and that is the key question here. Now let's understand the ecological and strategic importance of the Aravalli mountain ranges. So how it is important? Now in fact, first of all, we have to understand the environmental significance of the Aravalli mountain ranges. Because in the beginning we have briefly understood the importance of Aravalli mountains, but let's in detail understand the environmental significance of the Aravalli mountains. As I have already told you, this Aravalli mountains are spread across 4 different states: Gujarat, Rajasthan, Haryana and Delhi. So therefore they spread across 4 different states. Now in fact, you could see here, so this is where the Aravalli mountains are located. On the west of Aravalli mountains there is a huge Thar desert. So I hope you heard about the term called desertification. Now desertification actually means that the expansion of the deserts into the fertile areas. Now on the east of this Aravalli mountains, you could see a fertile Indo-Gangetic plains. They are known for fertile alluvial plains. Now here, Aravalli mountains play a very important role as a block to this desertification. They block the desertification. They block expansion of the desert into the eastern alluvial plains or Indo-Gangetic plains. So thereby they are ensuring food security. They are ensuring food security for majority of country's population. So therefore what we can say that it is a natural barrier against the spread of Thar desert, the first reason. The second reason is water, right? So groundwater recharge, particularly groundwater recharge, and even Aravalli mountains are home to several rivers. They are home to several rivers also. And in fact, they play a very important role in ensuring water security, particularly in the water stressed areas like Rajasthan and Haryana. So food security, water security, they prevent expansion of the desert into the fertile alluvial plains. And in fact, the Aravalli mountains, they also support forest, scrublands, wildlife corridors, and even it provide clean air for the Delhi NCR region as well. Because we all knew that as of now, Delhi NCR region is facing air pollution problem. Particularly during winters, it faces extreme levels of air pollution. So Aravalli mountains, so to some extent, provide relief to Delhi NCR region from the air pollution. So this is also another environmental significance of the Aravalli mountains. However, Supreme Court even linked the Aravalli mountains to the Sustainable Development Goals. If we have conserved the Aravalli mountains, that will also help us achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We know that there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and this is also known as UN 2030 Agenda. Now, in fact, as a country, for India, it is very important to achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals include some ambitious and very important goals like no poverty, zero hunger, health care for all, education. Right? So therefore, Supreme Court has actually linked these Sustainable Development Goals with the sustainability or protection and conservation of the Aravalli mountain ranges, because understand that these Aravalli mountain ranges play a very important role in providing clean water and climate action and even ensuring sustainable cities, right? So therefore, overall, this is the environmental significance of Aravalli mountains. Next, we'll understand the economic and strategic significance of the Aravalli mountains, because these mountains also have the economic and strategic significance as well, right? Now, first thing that we should understand about the economic significance and strategic significance, Aravalli mountains are generally known for the strategic mineral resources. Now, in fact, India has been aiming to achieve self-reliance in this strategic mineral resources. Why? Because we cannot afford to depend on other countries for these mineral resources, because this heavy dependence can be used for the geopolitical reasons by other countries. Now, how it can be used for geopolitical reasons? For example, rare earth elements. So China, which is the largest producer and processor of rare earth elements, if India depended heavily on China for rare earth elements, tomorrow China can impose some restrictions on export of rare earth elements to India, and that will badly affect Indian industries. So therefore, in order to reduce that dependence on other countries, so we have to focus on our own mineral resources. We have to depend on our own mineral resources. We should be able to extract our own mineral resources, and here Aravalli Mountains can actually provide one of the very important source of these mineral resources, right? So therefore, sorry for that. All right. So a very important source of mineral resources. Right. So in this context, since they are very important source of mineral resources, because Aravalli Mountains have minerals like tungsten, rare earth elements, and even lithium deposits also. Now, all these mineral resources are very, very important when it comes to the defense manufacturing. When it comes to the green energy transition, for example, renewable energy technologies, batteries manufacturing. Understand one thing, that we cannot depend on any other country for these mineral resources. We need to extract these mineral resources on our own. And in fact, Aravalli Mountains are known for these mineral resources. Also understand that recently the government of India has launched National Critical Minerals Mission with an expenditure of rupees 16,300 crore rupees. Right? So this is the total expenditure of National Critical Minerals Mission that the government has launched. Now, what is the objective of this National Critical Minerals Mission? The key objective of National Mineral Resources Mission is to further strengthen, further enhance India's self-reliance with respect to the critical minerals extraction, production, and processing, and substantially reduce our dependence on countries like China. Right? For example, when it comes to critical minerals, we need to reduce our dependence on countries like China, and we need to focus on extracting the critical mineral resources from our own country, from our own resources. Right? So therefore, one thing that we should understand here is that with respect to these strategic critical mineral resources, India as of now dependent on several countries for these mineral resources. For example, from some countries we have been importing 70% to almost 100% of these critical minerals. In the long run, it is not advisable to depend on any country for these mineral resources. So therefore, the defense officials have clearly highlighted that mineral dependence is a strategic vulnerability for a country like India. Because recently we knew that China has imposed the export controls, export restrictions on these critical minerals to India. So because it actually increases the vulnerability of India on on critical minerals. So therefore, we cannot afford to depend on any other country for these critical minerals. We should explore the possibilities of extracting these minerals domestically, and that is the objective of National Critical Minerals Mission. However, Aravalli mountain ranges are known for these critical mineral resources, right? So that is also another economic and strategic significance of these Aravalli mountains. Now let's understand what Supreme Court has said with respect to these Aravalli mountain ranges and what type of an intervention that Supreme Court has come up with respect to Aravalli mountain ranges. Now, in fact, on November 2025, Supreme Court has issued an order. Now, what Supreme Court has said in this particular order with respect to Aravalli mountain ranges? Supreme Court has actually given a definition of these Aravalli mountains, that any landform within the Aravalli mountain ranges which is more than 100 meters, above the local relief is considered part of the Aravalli mountain ranges. Now, what exactly is an Aravalli mountain range? Right, so this is Aravalli hill. So any hill which is above 100 meters of local relief is considered as Aravalli hill. Now, what exactly is Aravalli range? Now, Aravalli range has been defined in this way, that two or more than two such hills, right? So these are hills, Aravalli hills. So two or more such hills within the 500 meters, including the land between these mountains, is considered as Aravalli range. So this is how the Aravalli hills and Aravalli ranges have been defined by the Supreme Court. Now, Supreme Court has also held that mining which has been carried out in these Aravalli mountains will be stopped until a sustainable mining plan has been proposed for the Aravalli mountains. Mining will be allowed, but the mining will be sustainable in nature, right? So therefore, here Supreme Court has been trying to address both environmental concerns along with the economic needs, right? So what are the economic needs? Economic needs are extracting the mineral resources, particularly critical minerals, from the Aravalli mountains, and at the same time protection and conservation of environment and Aravalli hills, and that's why Supreme Court emphasized on sustainable mining plan in Aravalli mountain ranges. However, mining is prohibited in core areas or inviolate areas, except, for example, imagine that this area is a core area of Aravalli mountain ranges. Mining in this core area of Aravalli ranges is generally prohibited. However, if the mining deals with the critical minerals, strategic minerals, or atomic minerals, the mining will be allowed in those areas, and this is known as strategic exemption. So that means even if it is a core area, mining will be allowed for these reasons, critical reasons, strategic purposes, or atomic minerals. And that's where it may lead to the large scale damage might be caused to the Aravalli mountains with the reason strategic exemptions by the government. Let's understand what concerns have been raised by the environmentalists with respect to protection and conservation of Aravalli mountains. Now, in fact, the environmentalists have been clearly arguing that whatever definition that the government has proposed, Supreme Court upheld. So this definition further fragments the landscape into isolated islands of protection. So this will further ignore the ecological connectivity of the Aravalli mountain ranges. So therefore, the definition which has been proposed for Aravalli hills, Aravalli ranges is not at all sustainable, because it may lead to the fragmentation of the Aravalli mountain ranges. What exactly is a fragmentation? For example, imagine that this is entirely Aravalli mountain range. So mining will be allowed in some parts of the Aravalli mountains. So what you are doing, that you are actually fragmenting the entire Aravalli mountains by allowing mining within the Aravalli mountain ranges. So it leads to the fragmentation. And in fact, the environmental groups are also highlighting that valleys, plains, and forests that support hill ecosystem may fall outside the protection, and mining will be allowed in those areas, and that will further affect the environment and biodiversity of the Aravalli mountain ranges. However, once these concerns are expressed by the environmental groups, the Supreme Court has kept the definition in abeyance and formed a new committee over the Aravalli mountain ranges. Because it is very, very important to reconsider the definition provided for mining in the Aravalli mountain ranges, keeping in mind the importance of the Aravalli mountain ranges, and that is what the Supreme Court is going to do through appointing a committee on this. Let's understand, because we have recently understood that there are certain core areas within the Aravalli mountain ranges, and these core areas will be exempted from mining. However, if the government is going for mining for strategic minerals, critical minerals or atomic minerals, now in this case mining may be allowed, right? So mining might be allowed because of the strategic exemption. This is what is considered as a strategic exemption. So there are core areas, generally mining will not be allowed in these core areas, but within these core areas also mining might be allowed because of the strategic exemption in case if the mining is for strategic minerals. If in case mining is for the critical minerals, mining is for atomic minerals. So let's understand the governance and legal challenges in this. Now in this context, government actually lacks clear rules to reconcile climate commitments with the industrial demand. There are absence of such a clear rules. So once we have a clear rules that could reconcile climate commitments, we have certain climate commitments. For example, one climate commitment is by 2070 India should become a net zero. So India to become net zero, we need to produce a lot of energy from the renewable energy resources, right? So this is a clean climate commitment for India. However, in order to achieve this climate commitment, we need critical mineral resources. We actually need critical mineral resources. However, the problem is that we don't have a clear rules to reconcile climate commitments with the industrial demand, and that's where the problem here. So therefore, the Environment Ministry often relies on the executive discretion, office memoranda, project specific exemptions, right? So however, there is environmental impact assessment notification of 2006. So this environmental impact assessment notification 2006, it actually allows for exemption from public consultation for strategic considerations. Now, in fact, also understand that what exactly is the environmental impact assessment. So environmental impact assessment actually means that, for example, imagine that the government is going to take up a highway project, and this highway project is going through national park, right? So this highway project is going through the national park. Now what are the concerns or what are the problems that may arise in future because of this highway project in the national park? How it may lead to the fragmentation of the forest area, and how it may lead to the deforestation of the national park, and how it affect the biodiversity of the national park. So this is a careful assessment of how this project is going to affect these aspects with related to this national park, and how to minimize the negative effects associated with the construction of this highway through the national park. So minimizing the negative effects of this highway on the national park is the objective of environmental impact assessment. However, so construction of this highway project through the national park has more negative things, or it drastically affect the environment. It drastically results in cutting down the forest areas. Then the government may think constructing this highway project through the national park. So that's why this environmental impact assessment. So as part of environmental impact assessment, there will be a public consultation, right? So however, if any project which is for a strategic importance, which is for defense purposes, then there will be no need to conduct this strategic consultation under the environmental impact assessment. So therefore it leads to several problems as well. So let's understand recent policy shifts and how these policy shifts have been further increasing the risk. So for example, the Forest Conservation Amendment Act of 2023. So it has expanded the exemptions, particularly the strategic exemptions that included roads, railways, border, and even security infrastructure as well. That means the environmental impact assessment, public consultation will be exempted for roads, railways, and even border and security infrastructure. And in September 2025, there is an office memorandum that has exempted critical mineral mining from public hearing. There will be no need to conduct a public hearing if we are extracting the critical mineral resources from a particular area. Now, what happens generally with the public hearing? You get to know what are the concerns, what are the issues of the critical mineral mining, right? So you will take into consideration the concerns of the people, but here it says that in case of a critical mineral mining, there is no need to conduct a public hearing, right? So in fact, Supreme Court has also reopened the space for post facto environmental clearances, weakening the prior scrutiny. So therefore, these changes enable exploration and preparatory activities even before full clearances as well. So this is the problem with the strategic exemption provided to the critical minerals, even in the case of Aravalli mountain ranges as well, because we have understood the core area. In those core areas also, mining will be allowed if it is for a strategic reasons, if it is for a defense reasons. So let's understand what are the key threats that Aravalli mountain ranges have been facing. Now the key threats that the Aravalli mountain ranges have been facing is illegal mining. So illegal mining is the threat that these mountain ranges have been facing. And then urbanization or urban expansion. This is also one of the crucial threat. Urban expansion, illegal encroachments, infrastructure development, groundwater depletion in the area, forest denudation, deforestation. Right? So apart from that, the other threats including reduced public access to information, undermining accountability, and even potential misuse of strategic or national security claims to bypass the scrutiny. So these are all the threats that Aravalli mountain ranges have been facing. Now in this context, what should be the way forward? Now if we talk about the way forward on this, now it is important to protect Aravalli mountain ranges, keeping in mind the importance of these mountain ranges. Right. So in this context, what needs to be done to protect Aravalli mountain ranges? So first of all, the government needs to establish a binding test for a strategic exemptions. So binding test for a strategic exemptions in the sense that the government should not give the reason strategic exemptions in every case, because it may lead to the dilution of the environment, degradation of the environment. So therefore, these strategic exemptions should be used very carefully, and it should not be used as an all-out class to extract the mineral resources. And then there should be a mandatory public consultation with respect to the extraction of the resources, critical mineral resources, and even mining in the Aravalli mountain ranges. And there should be a comprehensive environmental impact assessment, and even groundwater assessments need to be conducted. And then there needs to be public disclosure of alternatives, such as imports of these critical minerals, recycling of existing mineral resources, substitution, and even mining in less sensitive areas. There should be alternatives, and the government should also focus on exploring these alternatives and strengthen institutional transparency instead of relying on ad hoc exemptions alone. This could be the way forward. So however, we have understood that Aravalli mountain ranges are very important, but in this context we need to balance ecological integrity with national security and economic growth. So this balance is very, very important. We need to protect the environment, and at the same time we should also ensure the economic needs are fulfilled. That is what is sustainable development, right? So therefore, in this context, protecting Aravallis is not just about the conserving hills, but it is also about safeguarding India's water security, climate resilience, even long-term environmental sustainability. So these are the key and crucial aspects the government should actually focus on. The next very important one is climate resilient agriculture, and let's understand why India needs climate resilient agriculture, why it is important, right? So we'll understand what exactly is a climate resilient agriculture. Now, in fact, we all knew that global warming, climate change, they have emerged as one of the gravest threats that Indian agriculture is facing currently, right? So why? Because of the climate change, we have been experiencing frequent floods, droughts, cyclones, heat waves, erratic rainfall or monsoons, and declining soil fertility, rising air pollution, and even increasing soil salinity. So because of climate change, we have been facing all these problems. Particularly the agriculture sector is the worst affected because of the climate change. Now, when agriculture sector has been facing all these problems because of climate change, it is very obvious that it undermines farm productivity, and even it reduces farmer incomes as well. However, agriculture sector in India, it supports nearly 42% of India's total workforce. And apart from that, it also ensures food security for 1.4 billion people, right? So therefore, in this context, agriculture sector, climate resilient agriculture is very, very important. Now, what exactly is climate resilient agriculture? Climate resilient agriculture actually means agriculture which can withstand the negative effect of the climate change. So we have been practicing agriculture which could be able to withstand the negative effect of climate change. It is considered as the climate resilient agriculture. Now, in this context, the climate resilient agriculture has become essential for sustaining productivity while conserving the natural resources, right? So therefore, the climate resilient agriculture focuses on increasing productivity or maintaining the existing levels of productivity, plus it also ensures conserving the natural resources as well. So that is the objective of this climate resilient agriculture. Right, now let's understand in a very brief way what exactly is this climate resilient agriculture. Now, climate resilient agriculture actually refers to the integration of biotechnology, ecological practices, and the digital tools, right? So therefore, you integrate everything, right? So what exactly is a biotechnology in agriculture? For example, genetically modified crop varieties, right? So biotechnology is genetically modified crop varieties could be part of the biotechnology. For example, understand that the genetic engineering as a technology can be used to produce the salt tolerant, drought resistant seed varieties, salt tolerant and drought resistant seed varieties, right? And then the ecological practices, for example, zero budget natural farming is an ecological practice. And then you also include the digital tools, right? So you also include the digital tools. A combination of biotechnology, ecological practices, and digital tools is what is known as climate resilient agriculture. And this climate resilient agriculture is very important for a country like India. Now let's understand what are the key components of this climate resilient agriculture. So climate resilient agriculture is having certain key components. What are those essential components of this climate resilient agriculture? Now first one is biofertilizer and biopesticides. Now understand that the problem with Indian agriculture is excessive use of fertilizers and pesticides, which are chemical fertilizers and pesticides. So we should focus on biofertilizers and biopesticides. So these biofertilizers and biopesticides can reduce the chemical input and restore soil health as well. And then we have to focus on climate tolerant crop varieties. What exactly are these climate tolerant crop varieties? Now the climate tolerant crop varieties are essentially those varieties which could be able to withstand drought, which could be able to withstand the soil salinity, which could be able to withstand the flood conditions. So those are climate tolerant crop varieties. So climate tolerant crop varieties have to be produced. Excess dependence on biofertilizer as well as biopesticides, and then the focus should be on soil microbiome analysis. So that means soil fertility should be another area that has to be focused upon. And then the digital tools, particularly AI advisories, precision agriculture. So all these things, a combination of all these things is considered as the climate resilient agriculture. What are the advantages of climate resilient agriculture? It helps sustain agri productivity. It helps sustain agri productivity. So this is the first thing. And the second thing is that it also help Indian agriculture to protect or to conserve the resources, protect or conserve the resources. So that is the objective. Now in this context, let's understand why India urgently requires this climate resilient agriculture. Why we need this climate resilient agriculture? That is the key question here. Now it is required because in India 51% of net sown area is rain fed. Net sown area is rain fed area. So what exactly is this rain fed area? So rain fed area is any area of agriculture which is only dependent on rainfall for irrigation, and there are no other sources of irrigation infrastructure. So which is considered as a rain fed area. So 51% of net sown area in India is a rain fed area, right? So yet it produces around 40% of the country's food. So despite it is a rain fed area, it has been producing around 40% of country's food. However, how it is going to be affected by climate change? So we have recently understood that because of climate change, there is a excuse me, there is erratic rainfall, failure of monsoons. Now if there is a failure of monsoon, what about those agricultural lands which have dependent on the rainfall, and how it is going to affect the food production, food productivity? So therefore it ultimately affects the food security of the country, right? So it affects the food security of India. Now, so as I've already told you that the monsoon variability, extreme weather events are going to affect these areas in future because of the climate change. For example, we have to talk about the heat waves, right? So in recent times, the intensity and frequency of these heat waves increasing around the world, in general, India in particular. So therefore, the heat wave like condition in northern part of India significantly reduced wheat yield. So significantly reduced wheat yield. Now reduced yield, what does it actually mean? Reduced yield means reduced profits or income for the farmers, one thing. The second thing is that it may affect the food security of our country as well. So therefore, we need to make our agriculture climate resilient. For example, imagine through using biotechnology, what if we have produced a wheat varieties which could be able to withstand the heat wave? Then we could ensure we could sustain the same level of yield. So therefore, farmers will earn decent income and it will also protect the food security as well. And that is the objective of this climate resilient agriculture, making agriculture resilient to the negative effect of climate change. And then we have to understand the rising food demand and increasing population pressure as well. So India's total population has reached around 146 crore, and this population will continue to increase. So therefore, when population has been increasing, this population will increase pressure on the existing resources, whether it is land, water, food systems. For example, imagine that there is a land so with respect to this particular one, what exactly is happening is that there is a fragmentation of the land resources, right? Because of increasing population, so there is a fragmentation of land resources, and everybody are not having water. And if there is food is sufficient for, imagine that food that we have been producing is sufficient for 80 crore people, but total population is 146 crore, but food that we have been producing is sufficient for 80 crore population. So therefore, this may create problems for India in future. However, because of climate change, if food yields further reduces, it may create more problems. So therefore, instead of these conventional farming methods, which are heavily dependent on chemical inputs, so the conventional farming methods have led to soil degradation and even declining factor productivity. So therefore, the climate resilient agriculture will offer a sustainable pathway to produce more food through fewer resources. And then soil health degradation and water scarcity is also another area that has to be focused upon, because if we excessively use the chemical fertilizer and the chemical pesticides, what has been happening? It has been leading to the degradation of soil organic carbon or even microbial diversity. So however, one thing that we should understand, that India is home to 18% of the global population, but only we have a 4% of the freshwater resources. If this population increases, there will be a stress on these groundwater resources. Population increases, the groundwater resources will decrease, right? So therefore, the other thing that we should understand, that in India, majority of the groundwater is extracted for agriculture. So around 80 to 85% of the groundwater is extracted for agriculture. And even in agriculture also, we don't have a drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation or other micro irrigation methods. We just flood the fields with the water. So therefore, we are wasting our resources in the conventional agriculture. So therefore, the climate resilient agriculture would focus on micro irrigation methods, so that with limited resources, more food can be produced. And apart from that, it also focuses on other important practices such as using biofertilizers, biopesticides, methods like zero tillage, a precision irrigation, per drop, more crop, right? So these are the methods which help in utilizing the minimal amount of resources to produce the maximum amount of food. For example, zero till wheat and direct seeded rice, they could reduce the water usage. So why not we can adopt these practices? Why don't we adopt these practices? Because they can reduce the water use and even the greenhouse gas emissions as well. So therefore, such practices have to be adopted as part of the climate resilient agriculture if we are practicing in India. So let's understand India's progress in this regard. So what progress that we have achieved so far in this front? Now, in fact, the Indian Council of Agricultural Research has launched a project called National Innovations in Climate Resilient Agriculture. So it has demonstrated the climate resilience technologies in 448 villages. For example, so how it has demonstrated the climate resilient agriculture? Through the system of rice intensification, which is also known as SRI. So in SRI, water efficient methods are being used, first thing. So apart from water efficient method of irrigation, so it also results in lesser emissions of greenhouse gases, and apart from that, it gives the same yield or higher yield, so thereby farmers remain profitable. And then aerobic rice has also been introduced. So what exactly is this aerobic rice? For example, when you are cultivating rice, you flood the fields with the water. Now when the rice fields are flooded with the water, so there is an anaerobic respiration that takes place, and this anaerobic respiration releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So that's how it may create global warming. So therefore, it has also introduced the aerobic rice varieties and even climate tolerant crop varieties. And then National Mission on Sustainable Agriculture has also been launched by the government in the year 2015. So this focuses on rain-fed areas. Now I have explained what are these rain-fed areas. Rain-fed areas are those areas which completely dependent on agriculture, completely dependent on rainfall for irrigation, and then water efficiency and soil management. And then we have to talk about the Bio E3 policy. So this Bio E3 policy has also been launched by the government, and it is also part of the climate resilient agriculture because it provides biotechnology led solutions. And in recent times, there has been a substantial growth of agriculture startups, particularly in the areas of artificial intelligence. So they are providing advisories, crop monitoring and yield prediction, everything. Right. So I hope you have understood the climate resilient agriculture. So let's understand the water divide in India, particularly in the context of recent contamination of water resources, contamination of drinking water in the state of Madhya Pradesh, particularly Indore. So that has led to several people affected by this, and even more than 10 people were died because of the bacterial contamination of the groundwater or the drinking water. So let's understand this. Now, in fact, safe drinking water is a fundamental public health requirement, and the safe potable drinking water is also a key indicator of a social development. Now in India, there are several programs which have been launched by the government, and these programs aimed at providing safe potable drinking water to every citizen. For example, the Jal Jeevan Mission, the Swachh Bharat Mission. Now, in fact, these programs aimed at providing quality water to all citizens. However, providing quality potable drinking water remains a serious challenge in a country like India, which has been facing several issues with respect to urban administration, water scarcity, water shortage. Even if we have a water resources, we don't use water resources in a wiser way, in an efficient manner. Right? So if you have a water resources and you just waste the water, so that's how it may create the water scarcity. Now, in fact, India will also face water scarcity in coming years, that too a bad water scarcity or crisis. However, coming back to this topic, what happened was recently the sewerage is contaminated the drinking water in Indore, and those people who have consumed this drinking water, so they are affected by bacteria. So it has led to several people got died and even several people got affected. So therefore, the recent incidents of water contamination in countries like India underline there is a persistent gap which is existing to access water and providing safe drinking water. So therefore, it actually poses a grave health risks, particularly to the poor and vulnerable sections of the society. So let's understand this, the extent of drinking water contamination in India. Right? So what extent the drinking water is contaminated in countries like India? So it has been proved by the National Family Health Survey 5. So what this National Family Health Survey 5 has revealed us? It has said that nearly 96% of households use an improved source drinking water. Improved source drinking water. So what exactly is this improved source drinking water? For example, imagine that a tribal family which has been drinking water from a nearby canal, or nearby a river. So we cannot say that this is an improved source drinking water. For example, municipal water supplied to every household is an improved source drinking water, or tap water connection, it is an improved source drinking water. Underground water, it is also an improved source water. Right? So therefore, the National Family Health Survey 5 has revealed that 96% of the households have been consuming improved source drinking water. Right? So here, improved does not necessarily mean it is completely safe. We cannot say that this water is completely safe, because the problem is that even though municipal drinking water is considered as an improved source drinking water, even sometimes this municipal drinking water, right? So municipal drinking water is also contaminated with the sewage water, and it is also contaminated with industrial effluents, chemicals and pathogens. So it doesn't mean that despite 96% of Indians are having access to this improved source drinking water, that doesn't mean that this municipal drinking water is completely safe. Whatever you are drinking is completely safe, because it is very often contaminated with all these sources. Now, the recent incident took place in Madhya Pradesh, Indore, where municipality supplied water has led to several deaths. So it happened in 2025. So where municipality supplied water led to several deaths, and even 2,000 people were affected by drinking this contaminated water, where the municipal drinking water is contaminated with the sewage water. Now, therefore, it has been highlighting that the failure of the urban governance structure, failure of the administration, there is no regulation, there is no proper monitoring, and these loopholes, these gaps are clearly highlighted here. So one thing that we should understand here is that Indore is one of the cleanest cities in India. Now, in fact, Indore is ranked as cleanest city in India from every year. Like every year, Indore is ranked as a cleanest city under Swachh Bharat rankings. So the irony here is that despite Indore being the cleanest city, here the drinking water provided to the people is contaminated with the sewage that has led to the several people being died or affected by this. Right? So therefore, in this context, let's understand what are the major sources of contamination of this drinking water. So the major sources of contamination including the sewage mixing. So sewage mixing in the sense that, the municipal drinking water supply lines. So the municipal drinking water supply lines, so very often, sometimes if there is a leaking pipelines, or old infrastructure. So that would allow sewage to enter into the drinking water lines, especially during the low pressure like conditions. Secondly, chemical pollution is also another method of contamination. Now in this, what happens is that excessive amounts of fluoride, arsenic, nitrate, or even heavy metals also, they affect the groundwater. And it has already proved that there are several states which already facing the excess contamination of fluoride, arsenic, nitrate, and even heavy metals, particularly in states like West Bengal, Bihar, Rajasthan, and even Punjab as well. Now we all knew that in agriculture, fertilizers and pesticides are excessively used. Now, the fertilizer and pesticide runoff water can also contaminate the existing freshwater resources, and if you consume those freshwater resources, you will get affected with this. So they are also one of the source of contamination of the water resources, even surface water or the groundwater. The other problem is that there is a poor monitoring and governance of these freshwater resources or freshwater supply systems. There is no testing and delay in detection of any such sewage being mixed with the freshwater resources, and then it is being supplied to the people. Lack of public alerts. So all these problems have been further creating more and more problems, and that's how it has resulted in an indoor like problem. So let's understand the health risks of this contaminated drinking water. So how it is going to pose health risks for the public. Now in fact, it is being said that this unsafe drinking water, so this unsafe drinking water will contribute to India's high burden of waterborne diseases. Now we also have a data, and this data has been provided by the World Health Organization. Now in fact, so we have understood the difference between communicable diseases and non-communicable diseases, but according to World Health Organization statistics, 21% of the communicable diseases are caused by the water related diseases. Right? So contamination of potable drinking water, so that may cause diseases which are very often communicable diseases in nature. For example, if you look at the key health impacts of this contaminated water, for example, it may cause diarrhea, cholera, typhoid, hepatitis A and E. So they are viral diseases and even bacterial diseases. Some chronic conditions, for example, if water is contaminated with chemicals, it may cause fluorosis, arsenicosis, kidney damage. However, there are some vulnerable groups of people for the contaminated drinking water. Who are those vulnerable groups of people? For example, infants are vulnerable, pregnant women, children, elderly, and even urban poor. They are vulnerable because there is a very high likelihood of consuming the contaminated water by urban poor. However, with respect to elderly, infants, pregnant women, so it is not easy for them to sustain the disease causing pathogens if they have consumed this contaminated water. So therefore, keeping in mind India's population, which is around 146 to 147 crore, so this further increases the problem. So when you are having the water stress, so increasing population, limited water resources, so this may create water stress, water crisis, and this further increases the existing risk of these waterborne diseases. Therefore, there is a need for a strict monitoring. There is a need for a strict regulation. However, there are certain policy challenges which are existing here. For example, the government has already launched programs like Jal Jeevan Mission, and the focus of Jal Jeevan Mission on household taps connections. And despite it has been focused on household tap connection, the quality assurance mechanisms still remains weak. So that is the one of the main problems. So therefore, the quality assurance should be the main focus of the government. They should be testing laboratories to regularly test the drinking water, its quality, and there is a need to detect any such contamination. Right? So in fact, enforcement of the Bureau of Indian Standards water quality norms is inconsistent in India. and there is a lack of public awareness about the reporting contamination. So this is also another major problem. So therefore, there are several policy gaps or implementation challenges which are existing in India. Now, in this context, what should be the way forward? The way forward is there should be a regular and transparent water quality testing with a real-time public disclosure that has to be done. So water testing laboratories must be established. And then there are several old pipelines which have been used to supply the drinking water to the public. So there is a need to upgrade or replace those old pipelines. And at the same time, the focus should be on quality assurance, providing quality drinking water to every household and prevent sewage water cross contamination. You have to enforce the environmental and water safety laws in India, and then interstate and local audits must be conducted. And then there should be a comprehensive community awareness campaigns, community awareness, knowledge dissemination, education. So all these measures must be taken in this context. So I hope you have understood this, and let's understand another very important topic, which is center's tobacco tax. So what exactly is this tobacco tax, which is going to come into effect from February 1st this year, right? So recently, Union Finance Ministry has notified that a new taxation framework for the tobacco products will come into effect from February 1st, right? So understand, tobacco products are not good for health. Tobacco products may cause several health risks for the people. So therefore, it is important to restrict, to regulate, to control, or to curtail those who are actually consuming tobacco. However, in order to disincentivize people consuming tobacco, what the government is going to do? Government is going to impose higher taxes on tobacco to disincentivize or discourage the consumption of tobacco products. Now, Centre has already passed the Central Excise Amendment Act 2025 and related GST changes to increase taxation on tobacco products, right? So in fact, this move also aims to correct the long-standing distortions, because earlier there are several distortions, shortcomings, gaps which are existing in tobacco taxation, and those gaps will be covered now. And in fact, this align with global public health guidelines and rationalize GST compensation cess regime, right? So let's understand this background of tobacco taxation under GST. Now, the Goods and Services Act was introduced in the year 2017, right? So when it was introduced in the year 2017, excise duty on cigarettes was reduced to nominal amount, while a GST compensation cess was levied to offset states' revenue losses. Now, what exactly is this GST compensation cess? Now, in fact, GST is known as consumption based tax, or destination based tax. So GST is going to affect those states which are manufacturing the products. For example, imagine states like Tamil Nadu, which are known for a strong manufacturing hub. So they have manufactured the products, right? So Tamil Nadu cannot collect the GST on these manufactured products. So these products will be, Tamil Nadu, may export these products to other states as well, right? So Tamil Nadu may export these products to other states. For example, imagine Tamil Nadu made certain products and exported these products to a state like Bihar. Now here, on these products, those who are consuming these products will pay taxes. So therefore, Bihar state will get GST tax, but not Tamil Nadu state. So therefore, introduction of this GST affected the manufacturing states. However, it has benefited those states which are consuming the manufactured product like UP and Bihar. So that's why those states which have strong manufacturing base, they have opposed the introduction of goods and services tax. Okay, now what the central government did? Central government introduced the GST compensation. So GST compensation in the sense that, okay, by this GST, you are losing certain amount of revenue to your state. What we will do, we will provide GST compensation for 5 years. A certain amount of money will be given to the state of Tamil Nadu, not just the state of Tamil Nadu, but other states which are actually losing revenue because of GST. So we'll provide GST compensation to the state of Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra. So those states which have a strong manufacturing base. So that's how these states have accepted for the GST. Now, in fact, how center is going to pay this amount? Through imposing the GST compensation cess. For example, if a person buys a cigarette, right? So he need to pay some extra money, and this extra money is known as GST. For example, a cigarette costs 30 rupees. GST compensation cess would be around 10%. So 10% means additional 3 rupees. Every cigarette additional 3 rupees would be to the GST compensation cess, and these 3 rupees will be paid to those states which have been losing the revenue. Right, so I hope you have understood this cess. I'll explain the cess and surcharge again. So excise duty on cigarettes was reduced to nominal amount, while GST compensation cess was levied to offset states' revenue losses. Right, so in this context, let's understand that, what is the difference between cess and surcharge. So cess is levied for a specific purpose. Now here on a cigarette, cess is levied for a specific purpose. The purpose is to pay money as a GST compensation to those states which are losing revenue because of introduction of GST. Now surcharge is levied on a high income taxpayers. For example, an individual who is earning 50 lakh per year. So on that individual, whatever tax he has been paying, a certain amount of additional tax he need to pay. So any person who is a high income earning individual and taxpayer. And then cess is all taxpayers on specific goods or services. For example, anybody who is buying cigarette, so they need to pay cess. There are several such as cess. For example, GST compensation cess, education cess, health cess, Swachh Bharat cess. Right, so there are several cess, but surcharge is only when the income exceeds a certain threshold. For example, 50 lakh. And then so cess must be used only for the specific purpose. For example, here GST compensation cess, education cess, health cess. So that particular purpose only it should be used. But surcharge can be used for any other purpose. Right? So apart from that, the calculation base is on tax amount or taxable value, and it is on tax liability. For example, health cess, education cess of 4%. And 10% on income tax above 50 lakh. Right? So this is the difference between cess and surcharge among the individuals. Now, what are the key changes in this new tax regime? So if we talk about the key changes, it has revised the excise duty and GST rates. Right? For example, new excise duty rates on cigarettes notified under the Central Excise Amendment Act of 2025. And even BDs moved from the earlier 28% of GST slab to 18%. Now, those who are purchasing BDs, they now pay just 18% of tax. However, all other tobacco products placed under the 40% GST slab. Now, imagine a cigarette packet costs 100 rupees. So, 40% GST means it will now cost 140 rupees. So this is going to be effective from February 1st. Now this high increase in the GST on these products is to discourage the consumption of tobacco. Right? So in fact, phasing out of GST compensation cess. So GST compensation will no longer be imposed because GST compensation cess was introduced for 5 years from 2017 to 2022. However, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the GST compensation cess has been extended up to 2026. Right? So because of the revenue shortfalls of the state governments. And however, from February 1st, 2026, the cess will be completely withdrawn. That means on the cigarette products, there will be no longer GST compensation cess. So therefore, this marks the formal closure of GST compensation framework, signaling a fiscal normalization. So let's understand the Health Security National Security Act of 2025, dedicated cess. Now, in this context, the Act has introduced cess on pan masala units, justified as funding mechanism for national security needs. Now, what is the rationale provided by the centre? So, the centre has actually provided the rationale for introducing this particular Act. Now, general tax revenues may face competing developmental priorities and non-lapsable purpose-specific cess. So this cess will not be lapsed, and this cess is also having a purpose. So this ensures a predictable funding for security preparedness, technology upgrades, and even defense procurement. Right? So however, what are the positive outcomes and the concerns? Right? For example, understand what exactly is a Health Security National Security Act of 2025. So those who are producing this pan masala, gutka, pan masala, khaini, so all those things, right? Because they also cause cancers, they also cause health risks. So therefore, those who are producing this pan masala or pan masala units, they have to pay cess. The cess is national security cess. For example, so a machine that has been used for producing pan masala and it costs around, imagine that it costs rupees 1 lakh, right? So under this, the Health Security and National Security Act, so 10% of Health Security and National Security cess will be imposed. So that means 1 lakh rupees, the original cost, so that they have to pay 10% cess. So therefore, 10,000 rupees they must pay to the government. So this 10,000 rupees will be used for defense purposes, used for national security purposes. So the government has been saying that health security. Here, imposing additional tax, we are discouraging the consumption or production of this pan masala. The whatever proceeds that we raise from this cess will be used for the defense national security aspect. So this is what is Health Security and National Security Act. So what are the positive outcomes? It aligns taxation with the public health objectives. It discourages tobacco consumption through higher effective prices. It strengthens the fiscal transparency and compliance. Now what are the concerns? The lower GST on BDs may dilute the health goals, and effective enforcement and monitoring will be crucial in this context. So I hope you have understood this. And the next important topic is about Lokpal and Lokayukta in India. So recently there is a news article on this. So recently the Lokpal of India cancelled a tender to procure 7 BMW cars worth of 5 crore rupees, because there was a widespread criticism from opposition parties and civil society as well. Now, in fact, critics have argued that such luxury procurement undermines the moral authority of an institution meant to act as a anti-graft watchdog. So let's understand about this Lokpal and Lokayukta and why they are created and when they were created. Now, in fact, there are two institutions which are created at the central level and state level. And central level it is known as Lokpal, and at the state level it is known as Lokayukta. Now, in fact, both Lokpal and Lokayukta are inspired from the Scandinavian model of ombudsman. So this is intended to address corruption, maladministration by the public officials. Now, in fact, this Lokpal and Lokayukta has been first proposed by Ashok Kumar Sen in the year 1963, and it was strongly proposed by the First Administrative Reforms Commission in 1966, and it has gained further momentum during India Against Corruption movement in 2011, particularly led by figures like Anna Hazare. Now, understand that Lokpal and Lokayukta are anti-corruption bodies which are created in India, right? So they are institutions which acts against corruption committed by the public servants, including the political leaders, including the Prime Minister and even Chief Minister also. Now, in fact, the Lokpal is established under Lokpal and Lokayukta Act of 2013. And Lokpal and Lokayukta are statutory bodies, they are not constitutional bodies. And Lokpal covers the central government public servants, including the government officers and the political leaders. Lokayukta is for the states, and every state should establish a state-specific Lokayukta, and the structure, powers, jurisdiction may vary across the states. And Lokayukta also covers all the government employees at the state level and the political leaders, including the Chief Minister. For example, there are some states like Karnataka, Kerala, Maharashtra, so they have a strong Lokayukta institutions as well. So finally, that's all for today, and thank you so much.